the cemetery a few years ago somehow managed to end up with a composer in residence, Mark Haney. And it's through Mark Haney and his association with the Little Chamber Music Series that he had a couple of young musicians he was working with who had this idea for this SS Sophia project. So he was kind of fostering and mentoring them and mentioned it to me as something he'd like to do at the cemetery for the 100th anniversary.
The Princess Sophia, of course, was a beautiful ship. It was, at the time, recognized as one of the best in service. It had only been here on the coast for 6 years. It had, at that time, all of the modern equipment that could be expected, including a radiogram and technology. It had electricity, so it actually had lights. It had heat, it had everything that you could ever ask from a small pocket liner, and it was an elegant small ship. Now, one of the questions which gets asked a lot is, why has this really been such an unknown disaster? And I think primarily it's for two reasons. One, we were at the end of the Great War. We're seeing it even now. As of tomorrow, we will be commemorating the end of the Great War with the armistice, of course. This will be its 100th anniversary this year. As we're here in Centennial Hall, there's also another separate commemoration which is going on in recognition of the Great War in another part of the cemetery. Now, I briefly want to mention to you just a few of the individuals that are here. I want to highlight two of the crew members and some of the passengers. In terms of crew members, David Robinson, who, believe it or not, he does not have a gravestone here at Mountain View Cemetery. This is a young man that at the age of 20 years valiantly stayed at his post, sending out his radio messages about the tragic sinking. So he is the one who sent the Mayday. He's the one who actually sent the final message at 5:20 p.m. from the Princess Sophia. He stayed at his post. His post was, the wireless room was located right next to the pilot house. So he was at the very, very top level of the ship. So by the time he was sending that last message out at 5:20, the ship had virtually sank. And then I also wanted to mention about the O'Brien family. The O'Brien family were really the largest family unit that was on board the Princess Sophia. They had been living in Dawson City for a number of years, 20 years actually for William and his wife Sarah. You can see their ages. They were very young. William was 40, Sarah 38. Then their 5 children, Grace, Pearl, William Jr., Robert, and Ruth. Ruth, of course, being the infant at only 2 years of age. You can see there's an asterisk beside 2 of the names. Pearl O'Brien is also, and also Robert O'Brien, Bobby. The reason for that is that their bodies were all recovered between the time period of the ship sinking in late October of 1918 right up until July of 1919 was actually when they finally recovered Sarah O'Brien's body. So they were all brought down and they were all interred here at Mountain View Cemetery. But we only know that there are 4 plots identified for the family. And we only know 3 of the plots which are actually occupied by family members. But when it comes to Pearl and when it comes to Robert, we can't verify that they are actually interred in the same location. So at this point, they remain unidentified. We don't know where they're buried here in the cemetery.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the location of the 4 family plots for the O'Brien family. And as you can see, there has never been a marker. So for anyone who was to visit the cemetery and was interested in learning about the fate of the O'Briens and where the family was buried, they'd have no record. So the Maritime Museum of British Columbia felt it was important that we recognize the O'Briens both as symbols of this terrible disaster and in recognition that these types of events should never be forgotten. And so with that, I would like to unveil a new gravestone. I'll just read what it says. It says, "Gone but not forgotten, the O'Brien family, William John, 41, and Sarah Ann, 38, Grace, 14, Pearl, 10, William Jr., 8, Robert, 6, Ruth May, 2. Perished in the sinking of the SS Princess Sophia, October 25th, 1918, in memoriam."
We learned that 74 are buried here in Mountain View Cemetery, and then we started gaining some inspiration for who we wanted to, whose story specifically we wanted to kind of think about when we were doing the programming for our show.
And also, of research-wise, we must have gone through at least 25 ship communications. So there's really good records because it's all written down, radiogram communications between a lot of surrounding rescue ships and the Sophia. So we went through all of them, read them all, decided which ones we wanted to incorporate in the show. That was quite a bit of research when we were up in Banff. We went up to the Banff Centre for Arts to develop the show in February of last year. And that's where we did a lot of reading and research, and
we were really intrigued by the radiogram communication because the event was so mysterious in the sense that they didn't know what was happening on board because there's everything was lost, every trace, every article,
because everyone was lost. Yeah.
But what remained and what didn't get lost was the record of the communication between the rescue ships and the ship. So we knew that that's something we wanted to incorporate in our production. And so we went through those 25-ish radiograms and we narrowed it down to 5.
Yeah.
So 5 are featured
in the show. Yeah, and also just the fact that the ship didn't just sink right away. It was up on a reef. So that we have all this record of this time between these communications where people were on board alive communicating with the outside world for almost 2 days.
the sense of what those 350 some people on that ship were going through, and how this 45-minute musical piece was able to very clearly represent that and make me get even a small sense of what must have been going through the minds of those people as they're stuck on this ship and it's starting to creak and break and fall apart, and the impact of that has unquestionably connected me more with those lives that are represented here in our cemetery. I was not prepared for that.